It's awesome to see everyone here. You never know when you're the first presenter on the first day of World Workplace who's going to show up. So this is a great turnout. Thank you all for being here. Good morning. How are you this morning? You excited about the conference? It's going to be a good conference. Yeah, there you go. You got some enthusiasm. All right, well, awesome. My name is Leni Rivera, and I'm here today to talk about the Chief Workplace Officer. Show of hands, how many of you work for a company that has a Chief Workplace Officer today? Show of hands. Crickets. All right, let's change the question a bit. How many of you in this room would like to one day become a Chief Workplace Officer? Show of hands. There you go. That's more like it. I love to see that. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. It's a tricky question, isn't it? Because Chief Workplace Officers don't exist everywhere yet today. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't, especially today. You hear workplace, the topic of workplace everywhere now, on TV, in news articles. We're popular. So I'm not deterred by the fact that there's still no Chief Workplace Officer, and neither should you. In fact, perhaps it's time that we start paving the way towards becoming a Chief Workplace Officer. After all, these are unprecedented times, and the need for an extraordinary role in our industry is growing louder. Let's talk about why. Decisions on hybrid are already being made. Regardless of what side of the fence you're on, whether fully in the office or flexibility of choice, the fact is that company leaders are already acknowledging that they need to make some type of decision on their hybrid strategies and their hybrid work environments. Some companies that may be more people-centered may be making their decision based on employee engagement or attracting new talent. Some companies that may be more finance-centered may be making their decision based on their real estate portfolio investments. But regardless of what the decisions are, and regardless of what the hybrid strategies look like, two important facts remain true. The need for a workplace, or the need for an office, is not going anywhere. And number two, in order to be successful, hybrid strategies need to include the transformation of a workplace. Let's start with the first one first. The need for an office is not going anywhere. Multiple sources of data already show this to be true. Let's look at a couple of the most recent. This is from the work from home research. Now, work from home research looks at the behavior of employees in the physical, in their offices in this new hybrid environment. Only US employees. But as of August this year, what we find is that nearly 60% of US workers are working in the office full-time. Nearly 60%. And if you combine that with those that are working in a hybrid environment, that's nearly 90% of US workers that are working in the office, at least some of the time. And now, by some of the time, I'm not referring to a day or two in a month. Because the same data shows that the average number of days that workers are working from home is 2.2 days per week. That means that majority of the number of days in their week, workers are working in the office. Now that's what workers are doing. What about companies? What are companies wanting workers to do? This is the Flex Index, US Flex Index. Now this data reports the different policies of US companies in this hybrid environment. And what we find as of Q3 this year is that nearly 40% of US companies have a policy involving the need for workers to be working in the office full-time. And when you combine that with those that have a hybrid approach, that's nearly 70% of US companies that have a policy involving the need for workers to be working in the office. Oh, and that 26% up there, let's not forget about that. That 26% is companies that have allowed employees to choose whether to work from home or work in the office. Because when you add that 26% in there, that's a whopping 93% of US companies today that have a policy involving the need for workers to be working in the office. And why am I so confident about that 26% of employees' choice and that they're probably also choosing to be in the office? Let's look at the Gallup report. Gallup is a study that looks at employees' preferences or their choices in the hybrid environment. And their latest report shows that the most preferred schedule is that they are working in the office 2 to 3 days per week. In fact, the most engaged workers are working in the office closer to 3 days per week. Clearly, the need for an office is not going anywhere. But while the need for an office hasn't changed, what the hybrid environment is changing is how people use the office. And that's why, in order to be successful, hybrid strategies need to include the transformation of a workplace. Company leaders around the world are already acknowledging that they need to start redefining how people work. I mean, it's great, right? You talk about, let's understand how people work. Well, how are people working today? It's great. Great new policies are being written as a result. New training programs are being developed, which is empowering leaders to lead more effectively in this hybrid environment. New recruitment strategies are being deployed, which is increasing workforce diversity. All of these things are really great things from a policy perspective. But hybrid strategies cannot rely on policy alone to be successful, especially when the majority of policies out there today involve the need for workers to be working in the office. That's why, as company leaders are redefining how people work, it is so important that they do this alongside redefining how this new way of working is supported in the physical work environment. Why is that so important? Let's go back to the data. This is from the Gensler Research Institute. This is by far one of my favorite pieces of research this year. What the Gensler Research Institute did is they compared workplaces that transformed themselves as part of their hybrid strategy, so made decisions to transform as part of their hybrid strategy against other companies that did nothing, that did not change their workplaces as part of their strategy. These transformed workplaces, they have defined as high-performing workplaces. And these high-performing workplaces made deliberate decisions to improve two things. First, space effectiveness and functionality, and second, the overall workplace experience. The impact that these high-performing workplaces had on the individual worker, on teams, and on the organization itself is staggering. If hybrid strategies are being deployed everywhere, and the common goal of these strategies is to empower people and the organization, then it would be incomplete to drive these strategies through policy alone, because data shows people need the office, teams need the office, organizations need the office, and the office is no longer what it used to be. It too is transforming in this hybrid environment. And that's why, in order to be successful, hybrid strategies need to include the transformation of a workplace. And yet, when we look at who is at the table today, driving the decisions on the hybrid strategies, who do we see? We see HR, whose objectives within the hybrid environment is to empower people through creating and driving policy, training programs, leadership development, recruitment strategies, and the impact on compensation and benefits. You also see corporate IT, who wants to make sure that the right software and hardware tools are in place to maintain organizational success in this hybrid environment. Sometimes you also see legal at the table, because their lookout is to protect the company from potential remote work liabilities. And of course, you have corporate finance. Finance looks at the impact of hybrid on both the individual worker from a tax and payroll perspective, as well as on the organization itself, in particular with their eye on cash flow, ROI, and the bottom line in this new environment. But where are the folks whose expertise is on workplace and on empowering people and the organization through creating and driving strategies in the physical work environment? And just to be clear, let's talk about all the different areas of a physical work environment that all these strategies involve. Because it starts with a workplace strategy and making sure the workplace strategy is aligned to the hybrid strategy. It also includes decisions on whether to renew, reduce, or terminate office leases, and then create a new appropriate real estate strategy. Decisions on interior design, Decisions on interior design and architecture to improve space effectiveness and functionality. And then, of course, managing the project build-out of all these tremendous new spaces. Efficiently maintaining, managing, and operating these new spaces. Safety and security measures in this new hybrid environment. Specific workplace services that are selected to improve the overall workplace experience. Specific technologies in the workplace for a seamless digital experience. Physical aspects and attributes that supports diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in ways that only a physical space can. And taking deliberate steps to ensure that the workplace strategy benefits rather than harms our planet. That's a lot. Now, who among these corporate departments has the skills, competencies, vision, or even understanding of all these different workplace functions who can drive the hybrid strategies in the physical work environment? The same environment, mind you, that, 93% of policies out there today depends on for their success. These are unprecedented times, my friends, and the need for an extraordinary leader in our industry is clear. So what are we going to do about it? Well, I'll tell you what we're not going to do about it. What we are not going to do about it is wait for company leaders to create the role of a chief workplace officer for us before we start to actively pursue it, because the need is clear and the need is now. So here's what we can do to start paving the way towards the role of a chief workplace officer today. 2 things. We need to start by knowing what the workplace industry is and what the different functions are in our workplace industry, so that, 2, we can work to unify these workplace functions in our organization and together establish the value of our workplace industry. Let's start with the first one first. We need to start by knowing what the workplace industry is and what the different functions are within our industry. I mean, we can't have a chief workplace officer if we don't know what workplace is in the first place, right? Well, workplace experience, or the experience that workers have in their physical work environment, is driven by all the corporate functions whose objectives, goals, strategies, and measures of success are all focused on the physical work environment. And they include workplace strategy, corporate real estate, interior design, project management, facility management, workplace services, workplace technology, DEIB, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the physical space, and workplace sustainability. All of these functions share the same objectives, goals, strategies, and measures of success, or OGSM, that are all focused on the physical work environment. This alone sets them apart from any other corporate function in any organization, in any industry. And each of their respective processes not only involves, but depends on the other workplace functions in order to be successful. That's why it makes sense that all these workplace functions work together under a single independent corporate function. not be split up across different departments in an organization, or work together under a department that has a completely different set of objectives, goals, strategies, and measures of success, but work together under a single department so that they can seamlessly involve and depend on the other workplace functions in order to be successful. I mean, having all these workplace functions under a single umbrella is not just necessary, it's just good old common sense. I mean, you don't have accounts payable in a separate department from accounts receivable just because they have different activities. You also don't have employee training in a separate department from employee compensation and benefits. Because even with different activities, functions that have the same objectives, goals, strategies, and measures of success, or OGSM, belong in the same unified department in order to achieve the same unified results. And just like any other corporate department, the workplace department calls for its own leader. So let's pause for a minute here, and let's talk about what a chief workplace officer even is. I mean, what does a chief workplace officer even look like? Well, let's take a look at the C-suite for some inspiration. A chief people officer normally rises from the ranks, right? So they normally have a very intimate and clear idea of all the different functions in HR. They also normally have an undergraduate and postgraduate degree in human resource management. So they have a very clear understanding of all the different functions in HR, what they do, what their processes are, etc. So they can create an OGSM, or objectives, goals, strategies, and measures of success across all these different functions and successfully lead them towards achieving a common goal. In the same way, a chief finance officer also normally rises from the ranks, and they too normally have an undergraduate and postgraduate degree majoring in finance. So they also have a very clear understanding of all the different functions in finance, what they do, how they work together, so that they too can create an OGSM across the entire department and successfully lead all their functions towards achieving a common goal. In the same way, a chief workplace officer would also need to have a very clear understanding of all the different workplace functions, what they do, what their processes and milestones are, what their measures of success are, and how they work together so that they too can create an OGSM across the entire department and successfully lead all these functions towards achieving a common goal. The difference, of course, is that unlike finance and HR, the workplace industry is made up of at least 10 different workplace functions, each of which has its own certifications, designations, undergraduate degrees, postgraduate degrees, and in many instances, board-certified licenses. And while many of us in the workplace industry, we normally wear multiple hats and have a general idea of 2 or 3 of the different workplace functions, a chief workplace officer would need to have a clear understanding of all these different workplace functions, what they do, what their processes and milestones are, what their key measures of success are, and how they all work together so that they too can successfully lead all these workplace functions towards achieving a common goal. This today is our biggest challenge, because in most organizations, we are all working in silos from one another. So, we got a little work to do, but that's okay. Because the one thing we're not going to do is wait for company leaders to create the role of a chief workplace officer for us before we actively pursue it. There are things that we can do today to start paving the way towards the role of a chief workplace officer, regardless of what level you're in or how your workplace functions are organized in your company. As we said, 2 things. We need to start by knowing what the workplace industry is and acknowledge what the different workplace functions are that make up our whole industry so that you know what you're leading. And then 2, work to unify these workplace functions in your organization and together establish the value of our workplace industry. So educate yourselves. Learn what the different workplace functions' superpowers are. Learn how each function, including your own, work together to establish and reach all of these amazing things that workplace industries can do. Learn their language so that you can lead them effectively. And then use this knowledge to proactively reach out to each of these different workplace functions, even if they sit in different departments in your organization, or even if they are existing outside of your organization. Reach out to them and work together, collaborate, brainstorm, create amazing workplace experiences that supports your hybrid strategy. And finally, leverage each of their measures of success to influence leadership. And use these metrics to establish the value that only workplace functions can deliver in any organization. Because after all, regardless of what the hybrid strategy is, 2 important facts remain true. The need for an office is not going anywhere. And in order to be successful, hybrid strategies need to include the transformation of a workplace. These are unprecedented times, my friends. And the need for an extraordinary leader in our industry is clear, and it is now. And while chief workplace officers may not exist in most organizations today, there is nothing that can stop you from being the first.